Let's imagine it's 80 years from now, or 80 seconds. Regardless of how far into the future we are, one fact is inevitable. You will die. I hope this isn't a newsflash or something that you weren't aware of, and I hate to burst your life balloon, but one day that balloon will pop. And when it does pop, you will be left with one question. How did you blow your air into the balloon? Now, everyone's balloon is eventually going to pop from too much pressure, but the question is, and this is a line from one of my favorite musicians, Russ, did the pressure make you pop or make you pop? You can either pop and have left a legacy, something to be remembered by, something that guarantees people will care about you when you leave this earth. Or you can pop under the pressure and ultimately have lived a life that just didn't live up to the greatest version of who you could have become and just didn't have enough juice in it to leave a legacy. In this debate, I'll be arguing that the attempt to leave a legacy before you die creates a driving force that facilitates your capabilities to be excellent and authentic. This is not to say that if you don't leave a legacy before you die, you have lived a horrible life and there was no point to you being alive. Obviously, not everyone has a chance to immortalize themselves at the greatest levels. And even if you don't do that, that doesn't mean your life was pointless. But we win this debate if we show you that the process of trying to leave a legacy elevates you to become a greater version of who you can possibly become. We have two main arguments. Our first argument is that the way to become the most authentic version of yourself is to figure out what you want to be remembered for. So many people want to become more authentic or become self-aware. Every self-help book or guru will tell you that self-awareness is a crucial step to success. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is at the top of that hierarchy is self-awareness. And when you're trying to leave a legacy, you are forced with the question of self-awareness that only the thoughts of a legacy can provide. It is the most existential question you can ever ask yourself, because it is a question that asks yourself what you want to be remembered for when you are no longer here. And being remembered for something is what pushes you to actually figure out who you are. It is the guiding fact to being self-aware. If you want to be remembered for being one of the best basketball players ever, you want people to find beauty in the legacy you left of working hard and having a goal and winning at the highest levels of competition. And in order to do that, you will then orient yourself towards that goal. But having a legacy and the thought of a legacy is what gets you to that orientation. And the chase itself, even if not successful, is enough to create an authentic version of who you are, which will at least create the probability of leaving a legacy, but you have to care about wanting to leave it in the first place. The impact to this argument is that when you are your most authentic self, you just become happier. You have a better understanding of who you are and why you do the things that you do, which means your ability to execute on the day-to-day tasks of your life becomes faster and more meaningful. You become in sync with your soul and say bye to yesterday. Our second argument, the process of immortalizing yourself drives you to excellence. It is really hard to be great at something. Like, it's difficult. There's a ton of obstacles. Your family doesn't believe in you. Your friends think you're stupid. You barely have any money to start. You don't know what you're trying to do. But you do have a vision. And that vision of being great is usually not just to be great for the sake of being great. It's more so about being great to inspire others with your greatness. And this is the process of immortalizing yourself. The beauty of living through your work. Since we are all finite creatures and have an end date, the amazing thing about humanity is that before we get to that end date, or when we ultimately do get to that end date, other people are born. When we die, others are still alive. And they have a chance to access parts of our souls through the work that we left behind. And if it was good enough, we actually end up never dying. And that's one of the most beautiful things about being a finite creature. Michael Jackson, Thomas Edison, Maya Angelou, all of these people and many more live through the work they have left behind. And they didn't just put out their inventions or art to be like, I'm great, look at me. They left behind a legacy and they put out their beautiful works to the world so that when they were gone, other people could find beauty in what they actually put out. To find purpose, meaning, significance, inspiration, and value in what your work was. In fact, you're doing a disservice to the world by not trying to leave a legacy, because if you have something to share that can change the lives of so many other people for the better after you die, then you should leave that so people have access to it. There's no point in taking everything you know to the grave. A legacy drives you to actually have it be there when you die. In conclusion, trying to leave a legacy guarantees you a chance to be the best version of yourself, which requires authenticity and excellence in whatever craft you're trying to pursue. Having a vision of what you want to be remembered for and then spending your entire life orienting yourself and trying to be remembered for that vision is the beauty of leaving a legacy, and nothing compares to that. We're all eventually going to fail the test of life because we're all going to die. But at least we should try to cheat on that test a little bit by trying to never actually die.
All right, time for cross-ex. You ready?
Yep.
All right, let's talk about this contention about your most authentic self. What does it mean to be authentic?
It means to know who you are and why you're doing whatever you're doing in life.
Okay.
In order to do that, you have to ask yourself the question of what you want to be remembered for.
So yeah, I'm curious about that second part. So you say that you need to ask yourself why you want to be remembered in order to understand who you are.
It is one of the best questions to orient yourself towards a better understanding of who you are.
Why?
Because
what does that question do?
Well, if you once you die and you realize that you want to be known for XYZ after you die, then you will spend your entire life trying to become that version, which will force you to ask more introspective questions.
How is that an authentic you then? It seems like you just created a vision of like a different version of you and then actualize that.
Well, no, at one point in your life, you have to pick a version and a vision of who you want to become.
Okay, so
there's questions you have to ask yourself in that process.
So your argument is that authenticity is a choice. You choose what is authentic.
Yes, there's a lot of people who want to be authentic, but because of the pressures of like an artist sometimes can't be their authentic artist self because they have to get a job, right?
Okay.
There's different ways where we suppress our authenticity, but if that artist wants to leave a legacy, it forces them to become an artist.
But when they suppress that authentic version of themselves, do they not often do that because they think that there's a trade-off or something better they can get by being inauthentic?
Yeah, but a lot of times it's just the not having to deal with the pressures of the world. Not wanting to take a risk, not wanting to live on the edge.
Okay, I think I would disagree, particularly in the context of artists. But let's talk about this second contention. So you say that the reason why legacies are good is because they can inspire others?
Yes.
How?
The process of immortalizing yourself is the process by which you live through your work, and once you live through your work, other people are inspired by the work that you've done.
Okay.
Especially to live through your work, you have to be great. And the process of leaving a legacy forces you to be great, which does it
force you to be great or force you to try to be great?
Well, it forces you to try to be great.
Okay,
some people succeed.
So the impact to this argument, you've read a bunch of people that were extremely successful.
Yes.
Edison, Michael Jackson, Maya Angelou. All these people were successful and achieved the goal. In order to generate this impact, it seems like you have to win that the end result of chasing a legacy is success.
No, not necessarily.
Then how do you inspire people when you fail at chasing your dreams?
Well, this is a question of the probability that you have to inspire people.
Okay, so what is the probability?
There is no chance in the world in which you don't want to leave a legacy.
Question. So what is the probability of a musician becoming Michael Jackson?
I don't know.
What is the probability of an inventor becoming Thomas Edison?
It's zero because they will never be MJ or Thomas Edison. But the point is they will become something of themselves, and if they're good, they will leave a legacy that inspires other people.
How often are they good?
I don't know, but you have to start with the question of caring about a legacy.
So this is about it. So again, but you just said it's about the probability that they will be good, but you cannot give.
It's about the process of trying to become great.
So
in order to do that, a legacy question fuels that.
So question, is the process what inspires people, or is the result what inspires people?
Obviously the result.
So
but
you
the
then
process
need to be
doesn't
successful.
get you the result if you don't do the process.
Cool, that's it. Now, I'm not the nicest guy in the world, but in the midst of all the pain that we're all going through, I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to people about life. Your life is beautiful. It is worth so much. You watching or listening right now, I don't know you, and I may never know you, but you are loved beyond measure. You have a life that is a gift. I'm going to borrow this from Viola Davis. You is kind, you is smart, and you is important. Your life matters. So it's a shame that you're wasting it. Wasting it chasing a vision of a legacy that you will never see. Wasting it letting the memory of your life overdetermine a life full of memories. Yeah, I'm still talking to you. Don't turn away now. It's not your fault. See, we're hardwired to think about what we leave behind. But if we did all the things that we're hardwired to do, the closest that we would get to a debate right now is me knocking Amit out. So let's get rid of the idea that you need to leave a legacy in order to live a good life. I negate. Now let's talk about how to judge this debate about life. Life is just a series of experiences. Therefore, experience is the way that we should determine what is good and bad in this debate. Now, we can't bring Dr. Martin Luther King here and ask him personally if his life would have been better without his chase for a legacy. So the only way to use experience is by judging the effect of the chase for legacy on a life and to see if it creates a positive or negative effect. So my job as the negative is to prove that there is either no effect or a negative effect to trying to chase that legacy, and Amit's job as the affirmative is to prove without a shadow of a doubt that chasing a legacy positively enhances your life. Contention 1 is crumbling under the pressure. The pursuit of legacy often creates a ton of pressure that weighs on people. According to Dr. Tony Lindsay, the pressure to leave an unquestionably relevant legacy can be crippling for people, particularly for young people. They can become overwhelmed and paralyzed by what they are meant to be doing. This is emotionally and physically difficult to manage with limited resources. And the pressure gets to people. Lots of people live their whole lives depressed because they feel as though their memory will fade away. And the wildest part is that no matter whether you believe in an afterlife or not, there is no logical reason to think that there is an impact to being forgotten, but we still treat it as a fate worse than death. Legacy building is a pyramid scheme where we pass down this self-destructive prophecy to people, often removing their chance at being able to live purposeful and meaningful lives. This goes double for people that can't leave conventional legacies. For example, those with terminal illnesses, particularly those that die young, have been known to be extremely distressed by the finality of their life and the perception that they would not be able to accomplish anything in that. These psychological impacts are deadly and have a ton of negative impacts, from taking gears off of people's lives to driving people to early deaths via suicide. Contention 2. The chase for legacy impacts the way you act negatively. First, you structure your whole life around it. Maybe you'll work a job that you hate and that works you to the bone because you think that it'll help you be identified as a success. Or maybe you'll marry into a successful family so that you can end up, being remembered. Or maybe you'll have a kid because that's the most conventional way for us to understand what it means to leave something behind. And see, Amit would have us believe that legacies inspire you to be your best self and put your heart and soul into something. But in reality, it might take you 9 years and $90,000 to build a worthwhile startup. Meanwhile, at least from a male perspective, it takes anywhere from 9 pumps to 35 pumps to make a kid. Now, it's not easy, but it's conventionally easier than building up a startup. So, you should definitely think about this as a terrible reason to bring a kid into the world. But it also colors the way you raise that kid. Many parents putting pressure on kids in order to fortify their legacy. Ralph Ellison, an American novelist, writes, "Life is to be lived, not controlled, and humanity is won by continuing to play in the face of certain defeat. It's time to accept that defeat. Most people will not leave the next revolutionary development in entertainment or in sports or whatever. Their kids won't either. So instead of trying to control life and literally change it for a legacy, just live a good one and it will be remembered well." Amit puts the cart before the horse. The more you focus on living a good life, the better your legacy will be. But the more you focus on leaving a legacy, the worse your life will be. Now let's talk about Amit's arguments. Amit makes 2 responses. First, or Amit has 2 arguments. First, he says that it will be good because you will be your most authentic self. That's just not true. People change their authentic self in order to be able to measure up to their vision of a legacy or a worthwhile legacy. All of our evidence says so, and the pressure that it places on people far outweighs. Second, Amit's argument about being able to create an authentic self doesn't matter because the question is not about whether you can find yourself, but it all comes down to whether or not you end up succeeding, which is how we'll also take out Amit's second point. His second point relies on being able to say that the result matters. Cross-examination is embarrassing on this front, but most people are not successful. And one of the examples Amit gives is Edison. This is precisely the reason why it's bad. Edison's entire career was built on stealing from people, which shows that the chase for a legacy drives you to do immoral things and creates negative visions of yourself. It's very clear here. No matter what Amit says, what a legacy does is inspire us to do horrible things, which means that the best version of his argument is still a bad or a bad principle to structure your life around.
All right, let's get into cross-ex. I have a couple questions about this first argument, that there's too much pressure. Should people not be pressurized to do things? Like, should we not have competition that creates pressure? Like, at what extent does pressure become a bad thing for human beings?
Well, two ways. One, when it engenders depression and ends up and the effects of that pressure.
Yeah, but a lot of things create depression, David.
Yeah.
It seems like you're not going to get rid of all mental health problems by getting rid of pressure, because to be alive is to feel pressure.
But this is about a principle that we've read evidence that says uniquely causes a dangerous type of pressure that drives people towards negative impacts.
So anything that causes a dangerous type of pressure should be abandoned on a principle level?
No, if the effects of that pressure end up being on balance more negative than positive, you should reject it.
Okay, so I guess how do we measure on balance? Like, yes, I know you said some people have because
it's only a minority of people that end up achieving that level of success.
So that's my question. Outside of them achieving that success because of orienting themselves towards a legacy, why aren't the lives of the people who tried to chase it still better than the pressure of depression?
Because a lot of them when they end up, well, I don't know what you mean by still better. Like,
as in, yes,
give me an example.
You didn't become Michael Jackson, but you became, Trey Songz. Like, he's not as big as Michael Jackson. He left an awesome legacy.
Got it. What percentage of people are Trey Songz?
But the point is,
this is infinitely.
So you're saying to get that successful, there's going to be like millions of people who just never get there.
Yeah,
and those millions of people shouldn't try. Is your argument?
No, our argument isn't just that they shouldn't try.
Well, then what's the argument?
Well, my argument is that the reason why people end up being depressed is because they structure their lives around the vision of a legacy.
Okay, but
people should just try to live good lives.
Okay, so
as opposed to chasing a legacy,
obviously begs the question: what is a good life then? Like, if I want to be,
I want
to be MJ level successful, and that's what I define as good, then what do you define as good?
I mean, I would never define MJ as just good. That's disrespectful. My point is that there are different levels of success. A good life could differ from person to person, but there are things.
It seems like you're arbitrarily saying people should just try to stay in their lane and not try to achieve the best possible version of their life that they could achieve.
What's their lane?
On the backs of
what's their lane?
Well, it seems like you're defining their lane. Like, their lane is obviously not like...
I definitely did not define anyone's lane.
So my question is, if someone wants to be one of the best basketball players ever, they're probably not going to. Why should they still not have that legacy in their mind? Like, LeBron wants to be the GOAT. Now, that's debatable. But the fact is, he's orienting his life around that decision. Okay. Why is that a bad thing?
No.
It causes too much pressure? Like...
What?
It seems like
you're asking me whether LeBron James, somebody that is 6'6", 250,
okay, but
one day a demigod,
one day LeBron
taste
obviously everyone's one day LeBron was not that, like 20 years ago, right? He was a shell of himself, but he had the ability to think that he could be the greatest of all time.
Because he was like 6 foot at 15.
David, but a lot of people are 6 foot at 15. We know people who are 6 foot at 15.
We do.
Shaq.
Oh, Shaq is
he's tall as hell.
Yo, Shaq is pretty tall.
All right, so I guess we just don't. It's just too much pressure. All right, let's take a break from the debate. Seems like you deflected every question I had, David.
And pretty successfully.
I actually think you did do a good job with perceptual dominance in that cross-X. This is going to turn into an interesting debate. Because I see your argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your argument is that no one can be as good as the people Amit is trying to think you can become, which means trying to achieve that from the starting point sets you up for inevitable failure, which means you will be depressed. Yeah, which is a very real impact.
Low key, I didn't have that set up. This is one of those things where you take someone's like comment and like you really try to twist it, because that setup wouldn't have made sense if you were just like people are successful. But as soon as you were like, these are the successful people, the benchmark of a great legacy, even if you didn't say that is what defines a great legacy, I have a jumping off point.
Right. So. And I don't think I could have just said, oh, if you're a good father and you have a kid and you went to the soccer games, you left a legacy, because I think that undermines a lot of the other arguments I'm going for. Because yes, everyone leaves a legacy, but it's a question of like, how do we define legacy in the context of greatness, which is what authenticity and excellence gets there.
Get to define what is
well, it's my case, right? So I structured it like that. I mean, because if I don't think if I pick that good of a definition, it just becomes a very basic argument about everyone leaves.
Because if you pick the father thing, then there's no like, I guess theoretically there's no like unique reason to think that like that is like, what does it mean to chase a legacy at that point?
What's the benchmark then? Is it Trey Songz or MJ?
I don't know, but
you're not defining it.
Well, I'm defining it as the probability of trying to get somewhere.
So like it's one of those
possibilities.
What's that?
Backtracking. I feel like we're back to the same point.
What's that quote? What's that quote that's like, if you shoot for the like stars,
you land on the moon.
Or shoot for the moon and you'll land among the stars. Or some. No,
stars are farther than the moon. Yeah.
Really?
So it's stars. Yeah, the stars are really
shoot
far.
for the stars, you'll land amongst the moon.
Yeah, on the moon, not
On the
amongst
moon.
them. Yeah, no. The point is, my definition is the definition is that the process of trying to be the greatest version of yourself creates self-awareness, excellence, and authenticity. The greatest version of yourself is not MJ or Trey Songz, but it is the
Let's
greatest
talk
version
about
of
that.
yourself.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not self-awareness. It's
Yes, it is.
actualization.
Okay, it's the same shit, bro.
What if the greatest version of yourself is being a great dad?
Okay, so that's David's argument. Like, I'm not going to say that's a good
lit.
argument, but like that's his thing.
This in sync thing.
Yes, how did you like that?
Okay.
I thought of that 30 minutes ago, and I was like, I gotta put this in.
I was.
No, let me explain how I was writing it. I said I was writing like you will leave yourself in. Oh, I said you become in sync with your soul, and then I needed something else, and then I didn't put a space between in sync, and I was like, and say bye to yesterday. Perfect, and that's how it came out.
I was so hurt with myself. I was like, this is so good.
It's so good, right? It's fire.
This is the first one I'll give you.
It was fire. Okay, this Edison stole everything. I probably shouldn't have mentioned Edison.
Edison
Now
stole everything.
I have to respond to this stupid argument about Edison, but yeah, this is gonna be a fun debate. I'm interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the debate. David sets up the framing for this debate, which is that if the effect on chasing a legacy is bad, then he wins. If it's good, then we win, which means this is all we need to win on this debate. It doesn't have to do with the end result of achieving the legacy, as per David's framework. It's only about the positive or negative effects of chasing that legacy. So we'll answer all the negative effects of chasing a legacy that he highlights that really aren't that negative and are kind of inevitable in the context of the human condition. But if we show a positive effect, then we automatically win this debate. Let's get into his first arguments. First, on his framework, we obviously agree the effect of chasing a legacy has to be good or bad. If it's good, you should vote for us. His first couple arguments. One, he says there's too much pressure. Look, being alive creates pressure. The fact that you are alive and you are trying to survive and then thrive on this existence is the nature of pressure. This statistic by Dr. Lindsay that says too much pressure gives too much, it causes too many things like depression, just isn't a unique argument. So many other things can cause depression or mental health issues. The fact that there is pressure to become a greater version of yourself is not the sole underlying factor for why chasing a legacy is bad. In fact, we will just turn this impact and say that sometimes a lot of pressure is really good because diamonds are made under pressure. In order for you to achieve something great, you have to have pressure that is imposed on you at the highest of levels, which means all of these arguments about psychological impacts are just the risk that you have to take for greatness. And don't let David get up in the next speech and be like, oh, not everyone's going to be Michael Jackson, so they shouldn't take these risks. Like, obviously, yes, not everyone is going to be the best version of, like, the best superstar in a particular niche. However, this debate is about if you chase the best version of yourself, which, yes, is not Michael Jackson, but is the best version of you, is that a good thing in the context of trying to leave a legacy? He's going to try to spin the debate as if you're trying to chase becoming the best version of some other superstar, then that's a bad thing because you're not going to live up to that, which means you're going to become depressed, and there's a bunch of bad impacts. We agree with that. It's not about chasing the best version of something else. It's about chasing the best version of yourself. The other types of superstars inspire you to become the best version of yourself. But if they didn't want to leave a legacy and if they didn't immortalize themselves living through their work, you would never be inspired to chase any best version of yourself in the first place, which means all this psychological impacts don't have an impact, and they're actually good because they force you to become a greater version of yourself. His second argument says this impacts how you act on your day-to-day life, and there's like a lot of different things you can do with a startup versus having a kid, and it's a lot easier. Look, this argument just doesn't have an impact. Like, yes, certain ways of leaving the legacy, like having a kid, are easier than starting a startup. That doesn't matter. This is a question of if you do want to have a kid, and if that inspires you to have a really good family, and if that's a really important legacy for you, and if that achieves greatness, then that's a good thing. Obviously, our argument is going to be that trying to achieve greatness outweighs all of these arguments because the pursuit of greatness is the pursuit of happiness. He then has this quote that says, "A life is to be lived, not to be controlled." The only way you control yourself is by telling yourself you can't be the best version of yourself. It's letting societal negative doubts seep into your brain and permeate the very essence of your soul by not giving you the capacity to achieve what you can achieve. To live is to feel like you can live after you are alive, and that is the beauty of leaving a legacy. Onto the affirmative case. First, his arguments on self-awareness. He has three arguments. They're all really, really bad. His first argument is the worst one. He says people have to constantly change when they're trying to leave a legacy, so they're not the most authentic version of themselves. This is a bad argument. People are always constantly changing. At one point in your life, you have to decide who you want to become. Like, you're not going to become an infinite amount of versions of yourself. And that point of your life, whether it's at 22 or 52, you should ask the question of what do you want to be remembered for? That question, that existential question, will give you a little bit of existential anxiety, which will be good because it will force you to then decide what version of yourself can you possibly become, which triggers self-awareness, which is a good thing because it makes you happier and it gives you a better understanding of who you want to become. He then says the pressure is bad. We can cross by the arguments we said before. Pressure is not bad. Pressure is actually phenomenal because it forces you to become something good. His final argument, which he kind of makes on the immortalization argument, is that chasing success is bad because if you don't get there, then the end result is all that matters. One, the end result is not all that matters. It is the process of trying to chase a legacy that matters, which is his framing for the debate. If you get that end result, that's amazing. If you don't get that end result, at least you tried. And trying is the probability of having a chance to get that end result. If you don't try, you're never going to get the amazing end result in the first place, but the process of trying is what gets you there. His final argument is like Edison stole from people. A couple responses. Okay, maybe Edison was a bad example, but that doesn't define every single person who left a legacy. Second of all, under pressure, people do a lot of immoral things. George Clooney snuck onto a movie scene to try to get his first scene when he was first starting out in the 20s in Hollywood, and he ended up getting that role, and that was amazing for them. That could be immoral because he snuck onto it, but it was still a good thing. Finally, even if you are not under pressure, everyone does immoral things. So this idea that pressure creates immorality is just a bad argument. Ultimately, you should want to leave a legacy, and that's why you should want to vote for me in this debate.
Okay, ready for cross-ex?
Yep.
Cool. I want to talk about this effects argument. So you say that it's not the effects of the actual success that matter, but it's only like the effects of trying. I just want you to explain this top part to me again.
I mean, this was your framework argument. I literally have written down, Amit has to show the effects of chasing a legacy are positive, and you have to show there's no effect or there's a bad effect. Our argument is to get to the end result of the best version of yourself. You have to start by asking yourself a question of what do you want to be remembered for, which is the chase.
If your argument is that we have to wait, is that we have to think about it through the end result of getting to that, how does that not apply past just the chase?
That's not our argument. This is a question of what creates a good life, right? Mm-hmm. What creates a good life is the question you have to ask yourself that orients your life towards that question. Our argument is a question of legacy orients a good life in trying to chase something that you can be remembered for after you die.
So when you try, so your argument is that the chase itself, it makes you happier.
It results in more self-awareness, which can make you happier, and then possibly lead to a massive result.
Then let's talk about that for a second. Why? Why does self-awareness matter external of reaching that end result?
Because
is self-awareness intrinsically good?
Yes, but also
why does self-awareness intrinsically matter?
Well, because if you don't know who you are, you're stuck in a state of limbo.
Right, but what is the impact? What is the impact to a state of limbo? It seems just to be that you can't achieve something, right?
Yeah.
So the end result of
that doesn't mean the end result is the only thing that matters. It matters because David, there's a good chance that a lot of people won't. But it's about whether or not
you achieve something or not.
There's a good chance a lot of people won't be successful because greatness is hard. But setting yourself up for that requires asking the legacy question. That is the only thing we have to win.
So your impact is a setup.
Yes, you have to ask yourself a question.
Got it. So this is a debate about
you tell people to be mediocre. We tell people to be great. There's a question we ask. There's a question you don't want to ask. That question is better for their chances at greatness.
Got it. Let's see. So let's talk about some of your case arguments.
Yes.
This pressure thing, right?
Yes.
You're just like pressure exists inevitably. My question is, does the amount of pressure that people face matter?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're like everyone faces pressure. Do you think that somebody that's just working a 9 to 5 faces the same amount of pressure to be great as let's say LeBron?
No, but they do face a pressure of not living up to the best version of themselves. Like a lot of people who just work a 9 to 5 and are bored with their lives face a lot of pressure of the fact that they're not doing anything with their lives.
You sound like B. Simone.
A lot of people. No, the argument is just like a lot of people are also just not trying to do much with their lives.
That's cool.
And you want them to be in that mediocre
That's cool.
life.
So people with 9 to 5 just know Amit thinks that you don't do anything with your life.
That's
exactly what he just said.
That is just not the argument.
In fact, I don't have any more questions.
That's not the argument.
Let's take the last 15 seconds to really explore that.
The argument is not if you're living a 9 to 5, you're not doing anything with your life. But at some level, you will reach a level of anxiety. Not all people, but a lot of people are like, what more is there to life? The human condition is not to be a factory worker in a company for 8 hours and then just go upon your existence. That's what
factory workers, you heard it here first.
There's more to life, and you have to ask yourself those questions to get there. If you let David tell you that, you're going to be in that factory forever.
Got it. Amit did a lot in that debate in that last cross-ex. A lot that I'm sure he's just so proud of. But the one thing that he did not do was make a substantial argument for why the effects of chasing a legacy are not detrimental. Now, he tries to hype up all of his arguments, but I telegraphed that at the beginning of my speech, that Amit would have to tell you that all of these incredible effects are possibilities, that this is how you can set yourself up, that this is the way that you can chase your dreams. But none of that matters in the context of leaving a legacy, because a legacy is fundamentally results-based. You need to be able to say that your results are good in order to say that that legacy matters. Now, Amit's best argument to this is that the process of chasing it is still good. Let's talk about that for a second. First, you can't just say it's good. You have to say that it outweighs everything else. And Amit only answers the pressure argument, but doesn't answer the argument about reframing your entire life around this. First and foremost, all of the stuff that we talked about the way that people seek particular jobs, prove all of this authenticity stuff false. They are not chasing an authentic vision of themselves. They're chasing a version of themselves they think will help them find success. Most people don't ask themselves the legacy question in the context of how do I leave said legacy, but just how am I successful enough that everyone remembers me. Second, Amit says that immortalizing yourself is really, really important and that it's the best thing that you can do. He even says that living forever is the true definition of living life. First and foremost, this is just absolutely horrible and places an immense amount of pressure on people. Now, Amit says that everyone faces pressure, but that statement should prove that there is a different type of pressure. Amit didn't just say, live pressure because that's the way that life is. He said that the goal is to live forever. That's a verbatim quote, which is something that you should take in regards when thinking about the amount of pressure you put on. Second is he says that our argument isn't unique. I will reread the quote from Lindsay. The pressure to leave an unquestionably relevant legacy can be crippling for people, particularly young people. Lindsay does a study psychologically and determines that legacy itself and that goal to chase it uniquely creates pressure that results in things like suicide or mass depression. You can't just say that that's not an impact. Third, most of the people that end up chasing these dreams end up being unsuccessful. Now, Amit obviously preempts this. Good job, Amit, but everyone saw that coming as well. The point is to say that there is a larger probability of people that fail, which increases the probability that those people will end up being depressed. This changes the way that you should read Amit's arguments. Now, Amit's arguments aren't just, it is good to try to chase this version of yourself, but he has to compare this with what happens when you fail in that chase, because you can't just divorce the consequences from the journey itself. Now, Amit has a ridiculous line where he says lots of pressure creates diamonds. Yeah, but you also get squashed under the pressure because none of us are a block of coal. Most people end up being squashed, which is why it's horrible for them. Amit says that you're chasing the best version of yourself. Obviously, you're not. You're chasing someone else. Amit says that Michael Jackson inspires people, and if Michael Jackson hadn't chased legacy, people would not be inspired. Ridiculous. It just means that somebody else would have thought of themselves differently. It's not like the music industry wouldn't exist without Michael Jackson or people wouldn't have dreams. This is the way you should read our argument and compare it to Amit's. Amit's arguments are that you chase a legacy in order to live a good life. Our argument is that you chase a good life and that leaves an immeasurably better legacy. When the legacy, when you decide to do things like be with your family, when you decide to be a good and honest person, is better. It is better to try to live as a good parent than a parent that says that they have to make their kid do something incredible in order for them to feel validated. It is better to try to live that life than to try to be Edison who steals from people. It is better to live that life than to try to be Bezos who literally works people to the bone in order to leave a legacy as the greatest businessman ever. I could go on, but it doesn't really matter. The laundry list of people that have had to do horrible things in order to leave their legacy far outweighs Amit's ability to say LeBron James was a good person, which means that on probability, time frame, magnitude, and all that other stuff that we don't really need to care about right now but need to care about later on, it's just true. Leaving a legacy leaves you and the world worse off. So just live your life.
Okay, ready for cross-X?
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk about this question about reorienting yourself is bad because you're reorienting yourself to a version that chases success. Why is that bad?
Because a lot of the time what ends up happening is that you forget that there is an entire world around you outside of that vision of success. Success is an intoxicating and addictive thing that often requires a lot of horrible actions. So should you
not chase success?
No, it's just that the vision of success that you have set, i.e., we gotta live forever, we gotta immortalize ourselves.
Okay, this is
direct
just semantics now. What is your version of...
No,
No,
semantics matter when it's a debate because debate is about words.
But if that version of success is so bad, what's a better version of success?
Just living a good life.
That is not what
That's
does that mean?
So you can't be successful if you just live a good life?
No, I'm saying, what does that mean?
We already know.
At least I'm specific. Like, what does that mean? What does living a good life mean?
I mean, it's subjective. But
so you just don't want to answer anything at that point?
No, it's not even that I don't. Well, I mean, I'll happily answer things. It's just like you need to ask questions that matter.
Let me make my question more specific.
Yes.
Why is
there we go?
Okay. Why is he's just okay? Why?
I frustrate you.
why is not reorienting yourself to chase a version that is successful not the process of self-awareness? Because, and I'll let you finish in a second. Because
we didn't even bring up that word.
Because
you said you were rephrasing another question. Like,
David. Oh my God. The question is, you say you say chasing a legacy is bad because you reorient yourself towards a life that only wants success. My question is, when you do that reorientation, why doesn't that process create self-awareness? Because in order to get success, if you're not a good basketball player, you're not going to just become a basketball player because a basketball player could be successful. You're going to do things in your skill set, in your niche, that forces you to become self-aware about what you're good at. Why is that not a good thing?
Well, I haven't said that that's not a good thing. I've said that the end result of that self-awareness, i.e. whether or not the self-awareness is valuable, is dependent on whether or not you're able to become that player.
Wait, before we get to the end result, I get that argument. You said
that's the only argument I made about self-awareness.
You said the process of reorienting yourself is inauthentic because you're chasing a version that only wants success. My question is, if you're chasing that version, why doesn't that force you to discover who you are to become the successful version of yourself that's possible?
Because most people don't take that lesson and then decide, I want to be better. They take that lesson and is like, oh, okay, well, I'll put this aside.
Everyone just wants a cheap way to success, basically, because that's the inauthentic
version. My argument is actually contingent on the fact that it's not cheap. It costs a lot, including giving up your soul sometimes.
But this is so. This doesn't make any sense.
It makes a ton of sense. You just don't want to admit it because you lose the debate.
If I want to leave a legacy, and in order to do that, I have to be successful. And in order to be successful, I have to figure out, what am I good at? What do I like? What don't I like? Why isn't that a unbelievably helpful introspective
Because
process?
A lot of the time, what you're good at is not something that ends up like some.
But then you won't be successful anyway. So I don't get this whole reorientation.
No, because
I'm not going to be a good basketball player, so I'm not going to do that.
Because what people end up doing is they try to find something. They try to find some way in there. Obviously,
they have to find some way.
Obviously, something like being a basketball player is a cherry picked example because you can't grow 6 feet.
Okay, how about sales? Sales? If you're not good at talking, then you're not going to go into sales. But if you're self-aware to recognize that, because sales is basically talking, then you go to something else.
Well, a lot of people end up not doing that. They end up just being miserable in that, and so they start in a sales environment.
Okay, there's a 100% probability they're going to be miserable and mediocre if you don't even ask the question in your world.
They start in a sales environment and then they never grow because they can't actually be good in that process, and then they end up being unsuccessful despite the fact that some sales rep thinks that they can be Bezos.
But the whole point is they realize it and they pivot, which is
they don't. A lot of them don't. They end up being miserable in that, or they don't pivot fast enough.
All right.
And then they end up being miserable in a job, as you called it, a 9-to-5 dead-end job.
Okay. All right, let's take a break from the debate. This debate has quite oriented itself into something unique right now. I think there's a lot of interesting arguments. One, I want to clarify my thoughts about 9 to 5. Go ahead. Okay, I'm gonna actually say this in my last speech, but actually no, I'm gonna save it because I have a good intro.
You know what this reminds me of? I feel like that moment that Bill Burr was talking about, where Bill Burr was just like, there's always that moment where somebody comes on the screen with some wild theory, and then everybody else just shifts their chair, and the camera pans in on that guy. As soon as you said that, I was like, I'm just...
Yeah, I have nothing to apologize for. I think I made a good argument. I think you were just spinning it really well, so my ethos was down, but...
Plus there was like a cultural moment where I was just like... But like, the argument's obviously like valid. It's just like, if you...
I'm going to say it in my next speech. You'll see, the introduction.
I'll let you mess up again.
All right. Thank you. How do you feel about... in general, let's take a break from the whole competitive stuff. How do you feel about, like, leaving a legacy? Does that matter to you? Because I'll say my thoughts first. I don't care about a legacy, actually. So I actually would negate on this topic because I believe in absurdism, which means I believe that the earth is going to die, the sun's going to die, none of this matters. So I do think that we should just live the best lives we can. But I think the process of trying to chase a legacy after arguing this does give you a better understanding of how to do that.
Yeah.
Even though I think it does matter.
My thing is just like, so I think leaving a legacy is good. I really do think it's subjective, and this is the part that I'm struggling with a little bit, is like, and the part that you're like kind of like ahead on It's just like, you don't have a way to understand, like, at least leaving a legacy gives an objective goal.
Right.
You don't have anything that's an objective goal. And I think that sometimes that's detrimental. Like, a lot of people are demotivated because they don't have a specific goal, and I think
they don't know where they're headed. Yeah.
Right, and I think it's worth questioning whether or not having a specific goal, even if that goal demands a lot out of you, creates a lot of pressure.
Right.
I think that it's worth it. Like, sometimes having a specific goal might be worth it in comparison to being completely demotivated and having no goal at all. This would be really new if you said it, but like, I think that there's definitely worlds in which people end up being depressed because they're demotivated.
Well, I think that's what I was trying to say in Cross X to an extent, right? Like, that whole 9 to 5 thing is like, if at one point you will realize that you should want more out of life. Because that's the thing, the human condition is about creativity. Like, it is not about being in a factory all day. Now, I'm not ignorant to the fact that some people can't pick their situation, they have to do that, but on a principle level, all humans do want more than to be in a factory making minimum wage, right? And the legacy question is just, this debate becomes a question of, that question is anxiety producing enough for you to tackle more pressure, which is what,
or do you crumble,
or do you pop, right? Either pop or you pop.
I still can't believe you're a Russ fan. Well, would I call you a fan? Would you call yourself?
I'm a fan.
You're a Russ fan?
I will publicly say that. I like Russ, and I think his motivation is music.
This is another one of those scoot away moments. Like, okay.
His music is very motivational.
The camera.
You know, he sells out arenas. Like, I didn't like his recent album as much as his previous albums, but I think he's not mainstream, but his lyrics are like, his bars are nice.
Fair enough.
And he produces all of his songs and stuff like that. In the context of this argument about depression, what are your thoughts on its logical extreme? Like, do you think trying to chase a legacy and not... Do you think trying to achieve a super big goal and not achieving it, do you think it could result in something super bad?
Here's the wild part about it, right? For most people, right, so this is the interesting thing about the Lindsay article. It's written very much in a particular context about people that don't have the means to do so. Right. Or like it's the original study was literally about kids with terminal illness. I think I said that before.
Yes.
Right? That's obviously not the condition that defines everybody, right? I think that the weird thing is, like, I can't believe that this isn't like the way this is going, but it's just like, some people shoot too high in their legacy. Like, so like there are some people that have voices that sound like they're broken, that try to be Michael Jackson, that just like shouldn't, right? But they like, that doesn't, I don't know if that means that like legacies themselves are problematic. Somebody just overestimated their potential building.
All right, back to the debate. All right, a lot of stuff has been said in this debate. Look, working a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. job is not a bad life. It could actually be a great life. But working from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. because you know you can do better, you know you can achieve more, you know there is a more excellent version of yourself on the horizon, you know and you believe in the possibility of wanting more out of this finite amount of time in your life is possible. And the reason people work from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. is not because people who are working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. are bad. It's because there is a different question that they've asked themselves that is fundamentally orienting the nature of their existence. That does not mean people who don't ask this question are bad people or live bad lives, but this does mean there is a deeper level that you get, deeper level you can get to in your life by asking this question. And this question is about, what legacy do you want to leave? Because David has said a lot of things, but he has not answered the fact that this question unlocks a lot of things in your life. When you ask yourself what you want to be remembered for before you die, you start asking yourself, what am I good at? How can I do this thing? How can I achieve more? How can I dream bigger? How can I inspire more people through my work when I die? How can I potentially achieve something that is better than my current situation? That is why we're winning this debate. Because the question of legacy is an existential question that David simply has not answered. That question is what forces you to wake up 4 hours earlier and work 4 hours later into the night. It is the idea that in a finite amount of time that you have on this planet, you will get more out of yourself. You will become the diamond that is formed under pressure and not just go away and crumble under that pressure. If you think that that's a better version of life, and that it means more, it's more meaningful, more purposeful, more significant, there's more importance, then that's why you vote for us in this debate. Do not let David get up in the next speech and let him brainwash you into living a mediocre life because he thinks that it's just okay to not try to achieve a legacy. That's the only reason for why a legacy matters, is to chase not being mediocre in the first place. The only thing David said in that last speech is that reorienting yourself is bad because you're chasing a version of yourself that is inauthentic, that only gets success. The thing he missed, and this was shown in Cross-X, is that is the best way to reorient yourself. You're always changing. At one point, you have to figure out who you are. The way to orient yourself into a way to know who you are, to become more self-aware, which leads to more happiness and leads to better decisions, is by asking yourself what you're good at, asking yourself what you can be successful at, asking yourself what could you do at the highest of levels that could leave such amazing work after your life that you could be remembered for. These are the questions you don't get answers to if you don't ask them. And David does not want you to answer those questions. The final thing I will say is that David says it's only about the end result. Greatness has to be immortalized through the end result. This is about the probability of even getting to that end result. And the only way you start or have a decent probability of getting to greatness, which leads to the immortalization that I'm talking about, is asking yourself, what type of legacy do you want to leave? Everyone leaves a legacy. This is a question of knowing exactly what type of legacy you want to leave, which forces you to become self-aware, which then forces you to have a chance to become immortal through your work and inspire other people even when you're not here. Don't let life pass you by. Cheat life. Escape death by living forever. Leave a legacy.
This debate seems to move from this is the best thing in the world again to, you have a possibility of doing something great here. This is the first sign that Amit's losing. But when you compare this to everything else, it's not a sign. It's just a straight reality. There's no argument Amit has that rises to the level of our arguments about the way that this forces you to change your entire life. Now, the depression stuff we'll deal with in a second. Amit says you don't want to live a mediocre life. All right, T.I., let's take your bet, on face. You say that people don't want to live a mediocre life, but they end up living miserable lives that are net worse than what you would consider to be mediocre. Now, there's this quick pivot. You don't work a 9 to 5 because you should work a 5 to 9, and that'll make you feel like... What are you talking about? Most people are not doing that. Your claim that they should cheat life is not something that they end up living by. They end up changing themselves in order to meet that. Second, this is the key argument that we're making. A 5 to 9 existence most people cannot handle, but they feel as though they're driven to do so because that's the way that success is measured. It's not measured by whether or not you can live a good life with a family. It's measured by whether or not you worked a 5 to 9 and built an empire. And a lot of those people, even the ones that managed to be successful in building that empire, end up living miserable lives and end up dying miserable and alone. This is not a good life. So if we take Amit's argument at face value, that's the first sign. The best version of his argument is a world in which you are lonely and miserable with a pile of cash, maybe hypothetical cash, and hopefully, you have somebody by your side to bury you. Second, Amit says that this unlocks a lot of things in your life, and that you think about how you can achieve something better in your life. Most people do not. But our impact, assuming the best version of this, outweighs. This is where we'll talk about some of the depression stuff. First and foremost, Amit still has not answered the fact that people make life decisions based on legacy. It's not just that legacy is motivating, legacy is addictive, and even the ones that where their legacy will never be a thing still push themselves towards this. This is what drives them to the point of depression, and it happens to way more people. Remember every example that Amit brought up? Well, in the last speech, there were no examples because each of these got brought down. But the one thing that never got taken out in this debate is the fact and the probability that people will end up being depressed once they fail at this goal of legacy. This outweighs every other argument Amit has made, especially when he reduces his arguments to just saying, this gives you the possibility to grow. This gives you the possibility to live a good life. This gives you the possibility to inspire people. Well, guess what? All of those things are possible without chasing the legacy itself. Remember, the last part of our first speech. The more you focus on chasing a legacy, the worse your life gets. But the more you focus just on living a good life, the better your legacy gets. Which means that it's plain and simple. You can be remembered without having to chase that legacy, and you can get some sleep, be with your family. You don't need to work this 5 to 9, and you don't need to be ashamed of working a 9 to 5. Even though Amit would tell you you should.
Good debate.
Good debate.
Well,
you got some explaining to do.
I got some explaining to do. First of all, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I really don't. We're all gonna die, so it doesn't even matter in my opinion. No, this was a fun debate.
Can't say you're not consistent.
Can't say I'm not consistent. So I'll clarify this 9 to 5 thing if anyone's listening. Obviously, I think that if you are living a 9 to 5 or you're living a life that maybe isn't the most ambitious, I don't care. Like, your life is your life. That doesn't matter. To me, this is just a question in the context of this debate, as I drop my pen. What type of questions can you ask yourself to achieve greater outcomes? It's not a question of overworking yourself from like 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's just a question of like, if you do have huge ambitions, that work is intrinsic in the process of chasing the ambitions.
Yeah, that pivot was good. I had to be like, there's got to be something wrong with 5 to 9. I
Right.
was like, at first I was just like, he hates 9 to 5s, and then you were like, no, I just want 9 to 5s to be better.
Yeah.
I was like, all right.
And that's the funny part about
First
it,
of
right?
all, BS.
So so my point is, it's not about like shitting on people who are living these bad jobs, which I don't even think that's the case. It's about
Kidding.
it's about if you want more out of life, what is there to do? And I think the two things are the work, which is the 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's second, the mental questions to ask yourself, which is the legacy, which was the pivot I did in the 2AR.
I love messing with you, man.
I know you do.
It is great.
And you're so good at manipulating my words, and especially with the camera, like you just know how to control the audience. So I'm over here trying to beg for people to not cancel me, and you're over here like, this is fun. This is a good debate.
Yeah. Oh, did you like the T.I. one? I tried it.
Yeah, the reference was because of a song, Live Your Life.
No, it's because of the song No Mediocre. I tried.
Oh, I actually didn't know this.
I tried. I was like,
Yeah, stick to manipulating my words. Don't try to come up with your own. They're not.
I
the
know
best,
it.
But,
I know it sucks. I'll actually leave that to you.
What's sorry to cut you off.
Oh.
I think what's like interesting, it's like you're defining legacy through like, I feel like just through creative pursuits.
Yeah.
Like, would you correct me if I'm wrong? Like, you're defining it.
I would agree with that. I think everything is creative, but yeah, you're definitely right. But I'm talking about being immortalized, and like someone who's like a construction worker is not necessarily doing something. But then again, if they're building a building,
But
right?
that's their art. That's what I'm saying. Like,
But
there's-
John Deere, though. John Deere. You know who that is?
I have an idea of that reference.
Okay,
but
then
I'm
then
not
never mind. Then your argument's just right. I think he was like he was like a dude that did like farming, and like now all the tractors
But like,
are named after
is
him.
the architect of that building's legacy enhanced by the building, or is it one of the 1,000 construction workers who worked on that
But
building?
what if that construction worker has value in the art that he or she produces, right? So like, they're creating something and they believe that thing that they're creating, even though
But the
it's
question
not in
is-
the masses, because the way it seems like you're defining it is then it goes back to the money thing too, because the architect would make more than the construction worker.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's not even about the money. To me, it's about like being the sole visionary around an idea, which is the Michael Jackson, Maya Angelou type of thing that I've defined.
Not everyone wants to be that visionary though. Not
I
everyone
agree.
wants to be that entrepreneur.
I think it was just
I agree.
a nice. It was an interesting place to just be like, this is how we will. And I think part of the problem here is that every term here is vague, right?
Yeah.
Everyone leaves a legacy. Like the thing about it is that everyone, because we're social creatures. Everyone, unless you just like manage to isolate yourself, everyone is remembered in some way, shape,
Yes.
or form.
Yep.
So legacies are inevitable. Like, but what does it mean to chase a legacy? Most of the time, people that are doing the chasing, as opposed to just people that are leaving legacies,
People trying to build empires.
are people trying to build empires.
And that's what I thought would be the most strategic, even though you did a really good job at making it a bad decision for me as a strategic framing for the debate. Because I felt like if I just said everyone leaves a legacy and chasing and leaving a legacy is good, your argument is like, well, that means just everyone lives and dies. There's no uniqueness to the chase of something that immortalizes you.
Who defines what big of a legacy that you left? Like, would it be
No
the
one.
kids, or would it be like the people you
That's
impact?
Honestly, it could be the masses.
Hold
though.
on, let's talk about that for a second, because I think this is interesting, right? I don't know who, like, I've read a few things about, like, the concept of a legacy. It was weird, actually. The way that I started, like, I found out what the word meant through the WWE, because there was a stable called Legacy, that was just, like, the kids of like, wrestlers. It was, like, third or second generation wrestlers or whatever, right? So that's the first way that I actually learned what that word meant when I came here.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been researching it since relatively young, and like most of what I found is just like a legacy is weird because it defines you in comparison to everyone else, right? Like
Defines you in comparison to everyone else.
even though you work to establish your legacy, you technically never determine your legacy, right? Like let's take the Edison example.
Yeah.
So right, when Edison was working, Edison thought that his legacy would be, greatest inventor ever. And for many people it is, right? You can't go to a single city in the United States without seeing Edison Avenue. Right. So like there definitely is something like that. But like I don't know if he would have predicted at the time that everyone would also see him as like the dude that like robbed Tesla. Right? Like I don't know if people would if he would have determined. I think we did that. Like later on through
research, legacy is
research,
constantly ever changing based upon the people that define it.
yeah. So I guess introspective question: is there ever such a thing as leaving a legacy?
No, I think there is though, because if you put out work that is just like so amazing or bad, like Michael Jackson, for example, every generation will define that work in the same way as the previous generation.
They may not value it the same though. Like you can't say that your grandmother's generation doesn't value values Michael Jackson the same way that you.
Well,
would.
maybe the work wasn't that good yet. Because if you think about like Justin Bieber, right? Generations before Justin Bieber was a thing probably don't value his music. They wouldn't immortalize him, but we are.
All right, fine. Let's give an example.
Michael Jackson, I think, is every generation.
Tupac, right?
Yeah.
Tupac was at the time like the face of rap, the biggest voice ever. Right. Now you got rappers that are coming out that are like successful that are just like, yeah, I don't really like mess with Tupac. I don't listen. I think like the first one I heard was like Lil Xan.
Yeah.
Whatever. Who was like, I don't really mess with Tupac. Yeah. Right. So like, do people remember the art in the same way? Like, do they remember it in the same light if it's not something that hits you? Like, I know like there are songs that hit me that I'm always gonna remember. They're like, I know they're not that like great. Like, Call Me Maybe was not a great song, but it hit me at the time. I was like 10 in the car. Like, if that song comes on, I will always remember it. I might not.
We're gonna play Call Me Maybe when we get in the car after this.
I would not always remember a Tupac.
So I guess the objective truth is that the society at the time in the year 3000 or year 4000, year 3000, Jonas Brothers, they always define. You don't know that song?
It's funny. I was thinking that too when you said that.
Get to the year 3000.
Don't sing. Don't sing. Don't sing.
Anyway.
No, that's not why.
No,
they're going on YouTube's not why.
Copyright on YouTube.
You'll get copyrighted.
So we're not gonna. Not because I'm singing it.
I think the Jonas Brothers sales just went down.
No, the song is the actual thing from the record label.
Who cares? Just don't sing.
Okay, the point is, every generation in every year
will
change the work that you try to immortalize yourself with. So I think that could have been a good argument you could have went for then, David, as like a non-unique. Or a solvency deficit, right? You could have taken out my ability to say you achieve greatness by being like every generation will just define it differently.
Right.
Because I don't think you said that in this way.
Yeah, that's so true.
You focused on the pressure thing.
Because if that's true, it means that even the best effect of a legacy is only temporarily fleeting.
But that's what I thought you were going to do, right? Because I think when we were talking about this debate before, I thought you were going to go with like everyone's going to die, the Earth's going to die, right? So I thought that line of thinking would have made you think like it really doesn't matter, right? Now, I guess my retort would have been like, but the chase, at least while you're here, is important. But the end result, I think this is an answer to immortalization. I think you could have been like, immortalization is so stupid.
The best version of Amit's argument is untrue because you can't be immortal because people will always remember you differently. And I think that
yes, you will all die and remember differently.
So it's not how people remember you; it's about the actual impact that you made. So MLK, for example, he made this sort of substantial impact that is helping people till this day, but people might remember him differently. Like someone in the year 3000 might not value him in the way that.
But then the question is, does his
legacy? Some people now think about it. Like some people now are just like, yeah, but
he cheated on his wife and all that stuff.
Right.
But so does that? But that means his legacy still mattered, right?
That means you can't have. If you're leaving behind a legacy, it's almost like you really got to take your ego out of it. To some level,
yes.
Because if people are going to value differently every single generation,
the work has to be so substantial that it stays the same. Which I think
the work has to stay the same, like the voting rights, all of that. That stays the same. However, the way people perceive you will be different.
That voting rights thing might be gone too. I don't know. I'm a little scared.
Why?
I don't know, man. It's just things are changing quickly.
But I think I don't know if they're getting rid of the voting rights.
Yeah,
I know it's bad, but like the thing, I think his argument though about music is just that though, like Michael Jackson's music may not be appreciated or Tupac's in 1,000 years from now. So does the work even matter at that point?
Because think about George Washington. Like people people are tarnishing his legacy now, which, you know, rightfully so, because whatever he did do.
If you're a
own slaves,
conservative,
all that.
don't cancel us for her saying that.
I mean,
Man, cancel me.
He wasn't that great of a person, but then there's some people who love him.
All right, first of all, Washington was a trash general initially, okay? This man almost marched his soldiers down the Delaware with limited resources. I've done the history. Throw him out.
Right, did you read that book that everyone reads with the cover with the guys on the boat in George Washington?
Oh no, I just remember he almost killed like half of his troops.
Anyway, I think the point is, like, it's a hard question because your work, as objectively good as it is, will be interpreted differently from people, which is the first argument for why it doesn't matter. But the counter argument is like, but at least you had a question that guided you to do that objectively good work at the time, which hopefully stands the test of time.
But does the work have to be on some level objectively good?
Yes.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Which is why your whole thing about, like, fathers leaving legacy for having kids, I was like, that's not a good argument for me. The argument I need to talk about is immortalization.
Yeah, 6 rings is 6 rings, but,
Right.
you know.
MJ is immortalized forever as the best until someone replaces that. And, like, but I don't think MJ cared about legacy. I think he just loved winning. Which is another thing you could have brought up. I think it'd be like, like, you know when I said people don't become great for being great, they do it for inspiring? I think it would have been like, no, people just like to be great.
Yeah, that's true.
Because maybe MJ didn't care about how he would remember, but he just wanted to win championships for the intrinsic desire of winning championships.
I think he just liked beating other people. Well, I mean that's something for a different day. But like he just.
Well, this was a interesting debate. We're curious to hear what you guys think. Do you need to leave a legacy in order to live a meaningful, purposeful, and ultimately significant life? Let us know what you guys think.
Just work a 9 to 5, people. It's worth it.
I'm gonna get
Tag
canceled.
me, Simone.
It's okay. All right, see you next time.